Should you start a podcast to try and grow your business? It feels like everyone has and their nephew has a podcast these days, right? Everyone is podcasting. That means you should be podcasting. Maybe, not necessarily. I will say one of the things that I found really compelling was that someone said podcast, there's nothing more powerful than being in someone's having your voice inside someone's head. So that's why I do these videos in addition to my blog. And that's also why I've been thinking about podcasting, is because of that. I want my voice in your head. I do. And they're right. That is really powerful. So I thought it might be beneficial to run through some pros and cons of podcasting, because if you are like I was and you're thinking, should I be podcasting? Should I not be podcasting? Am I missing out? Right? Fear of missing out, FOMO, is real. And especially when it comes to growing your business, are you missing out getting in front of a whole audience or multiple audiences that could benefit from what you have to offer if they only knew you existed? So let's talk about how to figure out whether or not you should be podcasting. So, first of all, what is the goal of your podcast? Because, yes, you can get in front of new audiences, you can build brand awareness, you can get people calling you and scheduling meetings and getting more of those sales calls. That would be great, and that is a fine and worthy goal. But it's not necessarily the only goal of your podcast. You can have that goal in addition to other goals, or you could have another goal entirely and be like, I don't really care about getting clients through my podcast. I want to do more networking. So, for example, it's a lot of people that I network with. Anytime I'm talking to another marketer and they have a podcast, I'm always going to ask to be on their podcast. Let's get on the podcast and let's start talking about marketing, just because that's something that I enjoy doing. And now we have a better understanding. They have a better understanding of what I do, and I have a better understanding of what they do and how they approach their work and who they work with. And they understand the same thing about me. And it's really beneficial that way. I also had a business coach for a while who had a podcast. She said she used it to get in the room with people who are at a higher level than she was at, who would never give her the time of day. If she just said, hey, can we get together for coffee so I can pick your brain, or we can talk about such and such, they would just ghost her. Maybe they would politely decline, but more likely than not, they would probably just ghost her. But do you want to be on my podcast? That is a very different ask. And she was much more likely to get people saying yes, because of course someone wants to be on someone else's podcast and get, again, have that conversation, have a good time, but also have that opportunity to get the word out about who you are and what you do and why we should all care, right? So that was how she leveraged her podcast. So those are some things to think about as far as what your goal is with your podcast. If you are looking to get more clients, again, just getting the word out about what you're doing and how you do it and who you like to work with, all great things you can do through your podcast. You can also have conversations with clients. Invite someone you want to be a client to be on your podcast. And now you're in a situation where you can ask them about the problems that you solve and what is that like and what have they tried to do to solve that problem, and have they thought about this or have they thought about such and such. You can then guide that conversation, so by the time you get to the, yes, stop recording, because you don't want to pitch them on the call, but once you've stopped recording, then say, well, this is something we help people with, so would you be open to another call where we talk about this? It's a little bit sneakier, but it can be really effective, because you're in the room with them, literally or figuratively, even if it's just a Zoom room, right? You're in a situation with them where you can ask them these questions and see and hear their responses. And you get to gauge them, right? Maybe you ask someone onto your podcast that you think would be a great client. And then through that conversation, you realize, you know what? No, this is not a good client. Never mind. Still a great podcast episode. Don't throw that away. But now you don't want to follow up for a sales call. So that can be a great way to leverage your podcast as well, just to talk to more people. And then, of course, growing your visibility, getting, like I said, getting the word out about their people. People not only search Google, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever your chatbot of choice is, they also search in podcast apps. The YouTube is a huge search engine. Every social media channel is a huge search engine. Same with, again, insert podcast platform here, whether it's Apple Podcasts or whatever it is. People go in there and search in that app, not necessarily always on Google or in a chatbot. So Being visible there can be huge for your visibility, and for your credibility. I mean, if someone searches you, also there's a ton of content in the show notes if you do it right. Just a summary of what you talked about, put that in your show notes. Guess what? The search engines are going to eat that up. And now they know, they have a better idea of who you are and what you do. They can direct people to those podcast episodes if they're looking for you, or it can just give them a better idea of who you are and what you do, so that if people are looking for your services, they know to send people your way, because it should be linked to your website, hopefully. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But those are some options for goals of your podcast. So now let's say you want to use it to grow your business, get more clients listening to your podcast. That leads to the next question. Does your ideal client listen to podcasts? So only about half of Americans listen to podcasts, which might sound crazy if you're one of those people who listens to a lot of podcasts and talks about podcasts, but that leaves millions of people who are not listening to podcasts. So statistically, most listeners are between the ages of 18 and 35. So if your demographic is a little bit older, maybe you want to try something else, because they're not necessarily pulling up their podcast app. I don't know that my dad has ever listened to a podcast. I doubt it. My mom, on the other hand, actually recommended podcasts to me. So know your audience, know whether or not they're podcast listeners. If you're in the B2B space, your ideal clients are probably listening to podcasts. Business owners and executives are constantly looking for more information to help them do their jobs better and grow their business to the next level. And a lot of them go to podcasts for that. So for that group in particular, I would definitely say podcasts. Podcasting for SEO, talked about that a little bit, how to make your podcast work for you. So now let's say that we have decided that yes, podcasting is great for you. Your ideal clients listen to podcasts. You have a great idea of how you're going to leverage it to grow your business. Now, how do you make sure that actually happens? So first and foremost, make sure it fits with your brand. If you are at all familiar with how I talk about branding and marketing, it is all consistency, 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 right? You want to make sure that if people are listening to your podcast, they're going to get a sense of who you are, how you talk, how you work. If they get a completely different sense when they go to your website or when they follow you on social media, at worst, there's going to be a little bit of a disconnect. I'd say at best, there's going to be a disconnect as far as like, wait, what? I thought I was getting this, and now over here they sound completely different. People don't like it when they don't know what to expect. So make sure you're consistent. At worst, they might not even realize that it's coming from the same company. Maybe they are following you on social media and also listening to your podcast, and they have no idea that both of those things are coming from the same person or the same company. So make sure everything sounds consistent. It does not have to have your company name attached to it. It could, that's an option. I'm just saying it's not necessary. It is necessary for people who are listening to go, you know, this sounds a lot like this other company I follow or this other person that I follow. I wonder if they're the same. And then they can look it up and go, oh yeah, they are the same. How about that, right? So make sure it fits with your overall brand, because if it doesn't, you're starting from the ground up with brand awareness for your podcast. And that is it's not worthwhile to do that when it's necessary. But if it's not necessary, why would you start down here when you can start up here? So make sure it fits with your brand. Make sure you have a schedule. There is no one right schedule. I listen to podcasts that release episodes daily. I listen to one that releases 2 podcasts, right? It's every Tuesday and Friday, 8 a.m. Great. Other podcasts I follow, it's once a week. It's at midnight. That's when it releases. No, I'm not listening to a podcast at midnight, but I know when I wake up, I'm going to get that little notification. This podcast published a new episode, right? So it is the ones that seemingly dropped off the face of the earth that I stopped listening to. Sometimes I think they really did just cancel their podcast. Other times I think they took an extended hiatus and it was just too long for me to come back to them. Speaking of which, the podcasts that I follow that are every other week, I do still follow them. It does take a little bit more intention. It does require me to intentionally go, oh, I haven't heard from this podcast in a while. Let me go see if they're still active. Oh, look at that. They just published a new episode. So that's something to be aware of. I don't want to say you have to publish every week, because that is a lot. If that gets to a point where you're like, I can't keep up with this and actually do my job, especially when all the client work comes in, then don't do it, because what's going to happen is you're going to stop publishing. And then as soon as you fall off that bandwagon, you're never going to get back on it, and people are going to lose interest, and you're going to lose all of those followers that you worked so hard to build. So I do think every week, if you can manage it, is great. But if you are doing every week or even twice a week, good for you. You probably need someone else managing that. Maybe it's your assistant who devotes a significant amount of their time just to managing your podcast. Maybe you hire a podcast production company to handle that for you. Depending on your ability to hire people to do that for you, that can be a great way to make sure that you stick to that schedule, because they're basically handling everything but recording for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So that makes it more likely that you're going to do what you have to do. Some of them will also help keep you accountable. If you haven't recorded anything in a while, they're going to reach out to you and go, do you have anything for us? Or should we republish something old? Which brings me to my next point. I'm not saying you cannot take a vacation. I take a vacation. There are absolutely weeks where I am not online at all. I tend to go up to Wisconsin in the Northwoods where my internet is pretty iffy. So no, I'm not I'm not recording my podcast. I'm not uploading anything. I'm not doing anything. I can schedule stuff ahead of time to make sure it goes out while I'm up there. But if I don't have anything new and I'm on vacation, I'm not going to stress about it. I'm going to republish something old. So that is something to think about as far as what is your schedule. Make sure you keep it consistent. You can always republish old stuff. You can also repurpose beyond just publishing old posts or republishing old posts, right? I absolutely love recording a video and taking the audio and turning that into a podcast and then turning that transcription into a blog post. Now you have 3 different pieces of content that people can consume however they want. People who want to listen to the podcast can do that. People who want to watch the video can watch the video. People who just want to read the blog post can read the blog post. So don't think that you're stuck with one, or don't think that like, oh, I need a blog post and a podcast episode and a video for my YouTube, and how am I going to do all this? You don't have to do all the things. You can do one thing and put it in 3 different places and not get punished for it, right? It just increases the chances that people will come across that piece of content in the way that they want to consume it. Speaking of video, that brings me to my next point: to video or not to video, right? Podcasts used to be entirely audio. The idea was a radio, but it was on your iPod, right? Remember when those were a thing? Now it's on our phones. So to video or not to video is something that you need to make. You need to decide that for yourself. I have been guesting on a lot of podcasts. Most of them are all come with a little disclaimer. Hey, we're going to be on video. Just know that we're going to be on video. That's what's happening. So come as you want to be on video. Other people will email me and say, yeah, we're not putting up the video. You don't have to turn your camera on, or you can come in your bathrobe for all we care, right? No one cares. So again, totally up to you. If your people are watching video, great. If not, don't worry about it. If you don't want to bother being video ready for every podcast episode, that is also something to take into consideration. That is totally valid. I will say that we are a visual creature, and we do tend to gravitate towards video. So absolutely make sure. I highly recommend that you include a video component, especially since it includes nothing more extra than just turning on your camera. You can always take just the audio portion and upload that to whatever system you're using to upload your podcast episodes. But make sure you have that video for YouTube. Also, other channels, not YouTube, are starting to publish videos. My iTunes app, I've noticed, is all like, hey, we have video now, and they are very heavily promoting that. So it does seem to be a requirement of podcasting now that you have a video. So that's something to think about. Get help. Like I said, you can have a podcast production company that can do everything from, all of the technical stuff. I will say it's not necessary to hire a podcast company. Like I said, they can do some of the editing for you. Some of the technical stuff is a lot easier than you might think. There are some AI bots that you can use to kind of clean up your audio and delete some of the ums and uhs. That said, I don't know how important it is to delete the ums and uhs. I think people gravitate towards conversations that sound like conversations, right? There's a reason I put up these videos, and you hear the ums and the uhs and the I fudged that word a while back, right? You all heard that. I did not edit that out, because we know that we all make mistakes, and that lets you know, A, that I'm a real person and not an AI bot recording this. which is another conversation entirely. So I would say don't delete the ums and uhs, and especially when you're dealing with video, sometimes that can lead to some awkwardness when you're jumping from the first part of that to the second part. There's a little bit of a glitch there and it looks weird. So I would say don't bother. But if it's something you're really concerned about and you don't want the ums and uhs, then absolutely take care of that. If you want some more fine tuning and editing and you are not a professional audio editor, then absolutely go ahead and hire a podcast producer. They can also do other things, like I said, help keep you accountable. They can even help strategize for you, helping you figure out what kind of a podcast do you want to have? What kind of a podcast would be most effective for your audience? If you need to talk that through with someone, depending on the podcast producer, that might be someone that you want to talk to about that. They can also provide recommendations as far as when you should be publishing, how long your episodes should be. Should you republish that old post if you're going to be on vacation next week? All that stuff they can help with. So, and like I said, if you just want to be like, okay, I recorded it and then hand everything else off to someone else while you get back to work with your clients, great. Podcast producers are great for that. Last but certainly not least, check your stats. I was so thrilled. I was going to be a guest on someone's podcast and we're talking about it. And she was like, yeah, my audience is da 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 da. It's like mostly women in this age group and over in this area. And I was like, I love someone who knows her stats. And she's like, yeah, we got to know our stats, right? Because that helps me understand, is this a good fit for me? Does it make sense for me to be on this podcast? Is she talking to my people or is she talking to someone else entirely? And again, we can still have that conversation and network with each other. That's worth it too. But not having those stats can make it harder for people to understand, do I want this? Do I want to be on this podcast or not? So know your stats. You might be surprised how many stats you can get on the demographics of people, as well as helping you figure out what content resonates and what doesn't. You might find that one piece of content gets a whole lot more downloads than a different piece of content. I have found that even on my YouTube channel, I get information. I'm like, oh, people are really gravitating towards this. Okay, good to know. On the other hand, again, check the demographics, because one podcast episode might be really popular, get a lot more downloads, but the wrong people are downloading it. You can dig a little deeper into the stats and be like, oh, those are not my people. That's not who I want to get in front of. Maybe I won't cover that topic again. Maybe I will focus on these other topics that didn't get as many downloads, but they got in front of the right people and the right people are engaging with them. So it's not just about how many downloads do you have, it's about who's downloading it. So keep that in mind, check your stats. All that being said, I have a podcast. I have been talking about doing this for a year and a half now. I'm recording in end of July 2026. Literally January of last year, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And I kind of got started and I never quite got off the ground with it. And even before January of 2025, I was thinking about it for at least a year or two. Should I? Shouldn't I? Maybe. All the pros and cons, right? So I finally did it. I launched it. It is called the Marketing Spotlight. If you follow me here on YouTube, you may or may not have noticed that I now have a whole other channel or a subcategory to my channel. So it is called the Marketing Spotlight. So you can follow that. That is my podcast. So I did go with the video component because why not? But I am also on all of the other major platforms, including Buzzsprout, which is how I am publishing it. So you can go directly to buzzsprout.com/2631606. I will have to see if there's a way that I can adjust that so that it actually sounds like me instead of just a random group of numbers. So that is my podcast. Please check it out. And if you have any other questions about your marketing strategy and which strategies you should be engaging with and which are just a waste of time, call me. Let's talk about it. We can figure this out together because, yeah, maybe you should be podcasting. Maybe it would be a giant waste of time for you and you should be doing something else. That is something I help my clients figure out. So if you want to have more conversations like this, you can, again, follow me here on YouTube if you are not already. You can check me out over on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Allison Verhalen on there. And of course, my website is AV, as in my initials, Allison Verhalen. That is avwritingservices.com. And you can reach me directly at info@avwritingservices.com. That's it. Have a great weekend. Happy blogging, everyone.